Good morning, everyone, and you're very welcome to this session on Enterprise University. If it's your first time to join me, you're very welcome. I'm Sharon Mulligan, product expert here with Enterprise, and in this session, we are going to look at Module 3 of Term 2, which is all around purchasing. So a couple of nice little surprises. There is a nice extra slide in there today as well, based on something that's just arrived and landed around purchasing this week. So without further ado, let's take a look at the curriculum so far and just remind everybody what it is that we will cover off today, and of course just a quick look back on the previous module as well. So as always, this session is recorded and will be made available to you on our website. So let me just start by sharing the curriculum. And I'm going to just disable my camera here now as well, so you can just focus in on the important stuff. So let me just take that off. Perfect. Okay, so everything purchases for Module 3 today. So let's take a look at the curriculum so far. So we've literally just started in Term 2 in October. So we started out with CRM and sales, into services on the last module. Now we're in purchasing, and then we'll move on, of course, to accounting, banking, and then all things stock, which in itself is quite a heavy session. It's over 3 lessons around all the aspects of stock, and of course then we'll continue on as well with expenses and everything in relation to reporting as well. So today's lesson, so what is the focus? So we'll have a quick recap on Module 2. So if you did miss out on Module 2, we'll just do a quick recap so you can understand exactly what it was that was delivered at the time. But do take advantage of the video recording that we have already on our website. That's enterpryze.com. If you click on resources, go into Enterprise University, you will have access to the previous modules that were delivered already to date. So always important as well for new starters if you need to get somebody on board and trained over the coming weeks. So we'll look at the suppliers overview today, and of course that's based on what we touched on Module 1, which is all about the importance of master data. So we'll refer to that again because again it's all around master data when it comes to procurement and the procurement process. We will look at the process itself. We will look again, just referral just to all the different types of purchase documents that you can implement within the system. We will look at the purchase approvals. So what does business spend management look like in the purchasing module for you as well? We will also look at landed costs. This is something that we have introduced this year as part of the purchasing cycle, where you can record, for example, freight, any freight charges coming in for goods that are being purchased abroad and that are landing in the country, and you want to record those landed costs, of course, based on the invoices, deliveries, I should say, that have come through the system, and how easy it is to set that up and record it at the point of entry. We will look at what settings are for purchasing in general. So what options you can switch on and off, and in particular around your approvals, and of course invoice automation. And I did mention we have a little bonus slide as well, and this is something that has literally just landed this week for purchasing or in around purchasing. So I'll get to that as we come towards the invoice automation piece. So stay on board if you can, and take in obviously all the different options that are there. But the importance of all of these modules, that as I deliver them every couple of weeks, when, as you know, that we roll out an update every month, and of course with that release comes great added features and benefits to you as an organization. So it's important that for each of these modules that I add in that information and make you aware of it at the time when it's there as well. So let's just do a quick recap on Module 2. So it was all about services and how to manage those services, but ultimately what services look like in your business, because it doesn't have to be that you are a service industry like ourselves where we're providing backup and support to you as a customer, but it can be something that you manage in-house as well in terms of internal calls or complaints or IT or training, whatever that looks like for you as an organization, that you could utilize the services for that purpose. And of course, around projects and managing projects and service calls as well based on those projects and all the activities that go with those projects. So we also touched base on the customer portal, which was again just giving your customers insights to managing their transactions for you, i.e. to pay a bill or to log a support call or to add a sales order if that's what you would like them to be able to do. We also looked at what's been added into the system, which is SLAs on service calls. So this is something that was added in October's release. And this is your service level agreements. So this is a fantastic addition to the system, being able to track those SLAs against your service calls. So if you've agreed a timeline of getting back to customers, so whether that's around items under warranty, whether that's on-call call-outs, or whether that's phone calls like ourselves. So we have an agreement with you guys to say that we will get back to you depending on maybe the region, or we might have a one-to-one agreement with a certain customer to say that we will get back to you within a couple of hours or within 24 hours, etc. So there's all the different terms of agreement that you can define under your SLAs on the service calls. So we looked at setting up Enterpryze for services and, as I said already, about managing projects using service calls. So the managing projects piece comes directly from your sales orders. So once the sales order goes into the system, you can turn that then into a manageable project, which is then stored in your service module. From there, you can track every aspect of that project right the way through from the sales order to the service call, and then all of the activities so that you can see the hours or the times or the days being ticked off and completed against that particular project. So let's move our focus onto today's topic, which is all about purchasing. And the first part we'll always refer back to is master data and the importance of master data. I'll always go back to this as part of every module because, of course, without the raw data and without good raw data, what information are you going to get out of the system? So it's always important to start off by looking at what is it that I need to have in the system to ensure that as I am processing purchase transactions, what information against my suppliers is important to me as an organization. So whether that's tracking just the standard fields that we have there against a supplier record or adding in custom field options to store important relevant information against that particular supplier. But not only against the supplier itself, we also have to look at the master data associated with the transactions as well. So don't forget, even with transactions, data is important. What are we tracking? So perhaps on a purchase delivery, there's certain information that you always want to track outside of the normal fields. So again, custom field options might be an option for you. So always think about the master data, always think about looking at the data that's already in the system and making it work better for you. And of course, remember that everything that you put in is what's going to come out in terms of analysis and reporting, and particularly around the grids. And this is always important. And I always refer to this even on the releases when we're doing the releases every month. I talk about all of the information that we've brought to the grids, any additional columns of information, because what they ultimately do is that they can be built up then to provide further analysis or further reporting for you. So focus in on master data, always important at the start of every lesson to ensure that the data that you have in the system is good data to start with. So just in terms of the supplier data, very similar to your customer data, when you look at a supplier record in Enterpryze, you get a full 360 view. The idea here is that you can see who the supplier is, you can see who the contacts are, any addresses, important information such as phone, email, website, the buyer, so this is the buyer or the employee within your organization for that particular supplier. You can also categorize by groups. You have the company types, which of course is automatically by supplier. So, and of course then the currency for the supplier as well. But in addition to that, of course, you can track contacts and activities. So all the different activities, if there's certain communications going between yourself and that particular supplier, that you can track that, make note of that, add in an activity to store that against the supplier account. But same as with your customers, you can hold special prices, so you can have a price history against your suppliers. Well, what do I normally buy that product for or that service for? How can I access that information? And again, that's all down to data. So when you're inputting, for example, a purchase order, you can click in on the unit price field to see the price history. Well, what are my historical prices? Can I export those to Excel? Can I report on them? And the answer to all of that is absolutely yes. So again, more important, master data information. And another aspect of your suppliers, of course, is intercompany transactions. So this is something I'll always refer back to about access to intercompany transactions within the platform. So this is where you can share transactions across your entities. So for example, you might create a purchase invoice in one organization and you might want to replicate that in another entity as well. So yes, you can do that across your entities using the intercompany transactions against your supplier accounts. So we have an intercompany tab on your supplier as well that you can specify who the interaction is going to be with in the other entity. So from one entity to another, where can you replicate those transactions? Moving on then just in terms of workflow and what can you do against a supplier. So of course, we get an overall account balance as well, overview of the activity on our supplier account, what the account balance is, any overdue invoice amounts, future commitment. So that is where I have potentially current open orders on the system. So what does my future commitment look like in relation to this particular supplier? And you can see there a number of buttons there that you can click on. So I can look at the list of orders or goods receipts or returns or invoices or credit notes or even approvals against that particular supplier. And of course, options here will appear, as always, based on your user permissions. So that's important as well, that based on whatever permissions have been assigned on the administration side, this is what you will see here on screen. And of course, in terms of actionable transactions on the supplier itself, there is an actions menu. When you look at a supplier account, just on the supplier menu, you can create a new action, and you can see there you can create a new activity, create a purchase order, a goods receipt, or an invoice. And they're all directly from the supplier screen itself. So lots of quick access and quick entry around the platform. Perhaps you're not utilizing at all on a day-to-day basis to save you having to go back out and go into purchasing and then go into invoice, that you can do it all directly from here. And the nice thing about doing the action directly from the supplier is that it automatically then populates the supplier on the screen. So what does the purchase process look like then as we take the master data through? What happens next in terms of bringing that through on the purchase process? So ultimately, with all transactions, the same as on your sales, you can have both stock and service item transactions. So you can choose and select when you go to add that transaction. You can do a purchase request. So a purchase request is something that you would generally do for internal purposes. This is something like, for example, myself. I'd love a new laptop. I'm not going to get one, obviously, but I'd love a new laptop. I actually did get a new one this year. But if I want to get a new laptop, for example, I can put in a purchase request. It doesn't mean anything is going to happen with that. It just means that I've requested for that particular item or service internally. And of course, ultimately, it'll be up to an administrator to approve that or a manager to approve that if I'm using, for example, the approvals process. And that can be approved and then brought all the way through then to purchase order and then ultimately delivery. And then, of course, the supplier will invoice that and, of course, they'll have to get paid. But that's where you can start the process. Otherwise, you can go from purchase order or even purchase delivery. But everything, as you can see, the same as your sales, goes from one transaction to another. So I can bring a purchase request to purchase order to purchase delivery to purchase invoice. And ultimately, of course, get paid or pay the supplier. Obviously, the supplier would be very happy to get paid. And of course, if for any reason there is, of course, a purchase returns, if you need to return any faulty goods. And of course, we have a purchase credit note. In effect, will cancel your purchase invoice, and whether that's full or part thereof. So lots of things to think about there in terms of the process itself. So this is just a reminder of what each of these transactions are. So like I've said, a purchase request is simply a way for internal staff to request goods or services. The important bit here is that it does not affect the supplier account balance or financial accounts. It can be tied into the approvals process. So it can be sent for approval and assigned to an approver or a manager or multiple approvers if that's necessary. And of course, ultimately then it can be copied to a purchase order to place the stock or service on order or commit that or quantity on order or service on order with your supplier. Purchase order, very different in that we record the stock or the service that you'd like to order from the supplier. It will not affect the in-stock totals. However, it is now on order, so it will increase your available stock. So you know that available stock figure that when you go in to look at an item, or for example, when you're in a transaction and you click on the quantity field for that particular item, sorry, excuse me, when you see the available stock quantity, that figure, so whatever you commit on a purchase order will already be included in your available stock because of course it includes committed and on order as well for the available stock. It's not what's sitting on the shelf, but what's available to sell or available to buy. A purchase order does not affect your supplier account balance or financial accounts, not at this point. You can of course set it up for approvals. So again, all around business spend management. So how do I control the spend within the organization? Well, set up an approval around your requests and your purchase orders to ensure that you can administer those and track the approvals as they come through. And ultimately, of course, a purchase order can be copied to a purchase delivery to increase your stock totals. And that's when it lands effectively on the shelf. And don't forget, in terms of purchase delivery, so whether you do that on the platform itself or even using the WMS to scan and receive that into your warehouse. So there's lots of different ways, of course, depending on what you're utilizing within the platform, how you bring that stock in. So goods receipt. So goods receipt is effectively your delivery. So now we've brought it in. We're receiving the goods in from the supplier, we're putting it on the shelf. You can receive in full or change your quantities to do part delivery, the same as we can do on our sales documents. So the difference here now is purchase delivery does affect your financial accounts. A journal is posted that will affect your goods received, not yet invoiced account and your stock account. So goods received, not yet invoiced. So this is where you've received in stock, and until you actually invoice, that particular GL account on the balance sheet will not reduce down until you've invoiced. So part of the invoicing, part of the journal for the invoice is that it will reduce down the goods received, not yet invoiced account. So in essence, that should be clearing out every time you bring delivery through to invoicing. Or of course, if for any reason a delivery was returned, that is obviously going to clear out the goods received, not yet invoiced account as well. So your in-stock totals will be increased. So what the count that we have on the shelf or in the warehouse will be increased. And ultimately then, of course, you can copy that to a purchase invoice so that you can the supplier can get paid. So the goods returns option is there as well if you need to return a delivery. So once the delivery is still open, you can copy that then to a goods return if necessary. So a purchase invoice, well, obviously, needless to say, it's a legally required document. So this is the ultimate proof of goods or services received from your supplier. And this is the point in time from an accounting perspective where the values for tax, the P&L, balance sheet, i.e. your aged creditors, will all be updated. And I did mention already around the goods received not yet invoiced, so where you have a delivery based on stock, and that's impacted the goods received not invoiced, then that will get updated once the invoice has been added. So ultimately, this is your request for payment from your supplier. So let's look at how to control the spend. So this is bringing us back then to the approvals process. So this is and only refers to your purchase requests and or purchase orders. Okay, so this is where you can enable these to be approved in the system. There's a couple of things around this. You can assign limits to the value of those purchase documents for each user. So basically what you can say is that a user can only have a document or a purchase order or a purchase request up to the value of, let's say, for example, 500, and then it's maxed out. So limit, so it can't be approved beyond that. So that could be their limit before the approvals, for the approvals to kick in. You can have multiple approvers as well. So for example, if you might have a manager, but you might have somebody in finance as well that has to approve the spend. So you might have a second approver for that as well. So you can design this whatever way that you require it around your purchase orders and your purchase requests. So how does it work? So very simple. When a purchase request or purchase order is added then into the system, so this is when the approvals is switched on, they are only added as a draft. This is important. And what will happen is it will actually change the option on screen. When the user goes to add a purchase order, it'll say purchase order draft. Okay, so it's not a real order just yet until it has been approved. So what happens next? The approver gets notified in the notification center that there's an order waiting to be approved. The approver decides to be. The user is notified of the response. So again, the notification center, they will be notified of the response. And then ultimately the purchase request or order is then added as a real request or a real order. And that means that that order now can be taken through to delivery, etc., when the goods come into stock. So very important to understand that, but it's a great way to control the spend. So let's just look at what that looks like. So for example, if we're in a request here at the top, you will see that the button will switch. It'll say new purchase request draft. Then it will go through to the notification center to the approver, and it'll see there new purchase request to be approved. The approver will click into that to look at the details. Alternatively, they can come here to the approvals tab, which is in purchasing. They can see what approvals have to be taken care of, for example, all the different users. And what they can decide to do here is simply approve or reject. Now, they can drill into any of those documents to see exactly what they contain, to see what's being requested, what items, the value, etc. The value is displayed there, obviously, on the grid, but you can use your column chooser to bring in the columns that are relevant to you as well on the approvals grid. So it's a really, really simple process. Now we're going to look at landed costs. So this is basically giving you the ability to track the total cost of the goods that you have brought in. So any imported goods or services, for example, so to include any of the shipping, duties, or other expenses that are only calculated, or the true cost is only relevant or confirmed or basically recognized at the time when the goods have landed with you. So by accurately allocating the costs to the inventory, you can ensure the correct valuation in relation to that particular stock item, and of course, better profitability analysis as well going forward. So what we've introduced there this year is a new setting. So in module settings, you have a panel for landed cost types, and there you can see the example on screen. Very simply, what you do is you define the codes and the names for those landed costs, make them relevant to what it is your organization gets, what costs you need to track as items are imported and land with you. So you can see there some examples. We've got shipping, duty, taxes, freight. You can see there we've assigned the GL account code for each of those because, of course, that's important, because what we will do as part of the landed costs, we will post journal entries to track those landed costs as they come through, the true landed costs. So a landed cost is actually tracked against your purchase delivery. So as soon as the goods land, you've gone into Enterprise and you've brought your order through to delivery. So now you've received in and then you begin to allocate the landed cost. So whether you do that as value just for the overall invoice itself, or you can do it at line level. So we've got both available too. So you could do a division at line level and allocate a specific percentage over each line of the purchase delivery. So whatever it is that you require, so whether that's the full amount against the overall delivery itself, or at line level. And of course, if you need to divide out those landed costs, depending on maybe part of it is duty, part of it might be freight, part of it might be taxes or other costs, whatever it is that you need to classify on the delivery, that you can do that. And ultimately what happens is that we create key journals are created in the accounting module. The purpose of the first two is actually to move the landed cost amount, because remember that you've already created the journal entry for the delivery. And remember, if you remember on the slide that I mentioned about the delivery, the goods receipt, the way the delivery will have affected your the cost of goods for the invoice account, so goods not yet invoiced account, and of course your stock account. So what it does is it takes out the value, it effectively moves it out in and out of an account to take it out of your stock account, and then it moves it into the landed costs, and then ultimately to recognize it in the full landed costs account. So that's really what the three journals are doing. So it's moving the value in and out because the delivery has already been created. It's moving the value in and out to recognize it truly in the landed costs GL account. So if we look here just at a quick demonstration, so this is the actions menu on your delivery. This is the first screen here. So you click on actions, you simply click on landed cost. Then this new WISE panel will appear. You've got two tabs, if you can see them there. We've got auto and manual. Okay, so auto is a full allocation by a full amount for example, you can see there the freight landed cost. You can see exactly what it is. You can choose the cost type. So this is where you can automatically choose the cost type and let it follow through. You also have a manual option. So this allows you to divide out the cost types. So whether it's for each item or line item on the delivery, how is that division going to look like for the landed cost? So for example, the cost type I've chosen here is freight. You can see currency, the landed cost in total is 50. However, I'm going to put 25 of that against the first item. I'm going to put another 25 of that against the second item. So that's what I'm doing. I'm dividing it out against the line items on the delivery itself. But ultimately, it's the 50 that's going to go to the freight GL account once the final journal posting is posted. So just to show you as well that when you go back to the goods receipt grid, so this is just bringing you back to the grid itself, we have two columns that we've added here to give you further analysis. We've got landed costs, but we've got the landed cost in the system currency, which is your organization currency, but we also have the landed cost in the supplier currency. So you can see the 50 there, which is the second figure, and the 31 is the system currency because that's held in a completely different currency, and you can see then the 50 in the supplier currency. So I'm just showing you that just for difference, because of course goods are going to be imported from different current countries and potentially a different currency to your organization currency. So at least you can see the difference between the two once they go posted through to the GL accounts. Okay, so now let's look at the initial settings overall for purchasing. So if we start here with purchasing, you can see here there's lots of different things that we can switch on. We can disable or enable approvals. If you want to enable approvals, you need to leave the toggle off to the left. The way it's switched on there at the moment means it's disabled. That means approvals for purchase requests and purchase orders is currently switched off. So switch it to the left, and then you will be able to use, if you choose, approval limits. I mentioned already about multiple approvers. So you can have multiple approvers. You can set the limits for the value of the documents per user. We've got some additional options there to auto-create the supplier code, and that's just a nice quick admin option to save you having to type in a code each time for a new master record, so for a new supplier record. Default tax code. So this is the default tax code on transactions. Will it be used by the items or will it be used by the company, i.e. the supplier? So you get to choose at this stage. You also will have, as I've mentioned already, and we saw that already around the landed costs, there is a setting, a panel, a separate panel for the landed costs. And of course, there is an option here as well for purchase invoice scanning. So that's something we're going to look at as well this morning during the live demonstration around OCR scanning and being able to automatically scan in your purchase invoices and approve those and post them onto the system. So that's all handled here as well under the settings. So let's just do a quick demonstration there. So into settings, into module settings, and this is just the additional piece here. So this is what it will look like on the top half. If you have approval switched on, this is what it should look like. The disable approvals button should be switched off to the left. Then you can decide whether to switch on or off the approval limits, switch on or off multiple approvers. And then at the bottom of the screen, there is an approval limits button where you can then come in and for each user, you can specify what value the approvers can approve up to. So for the 2 approvers that we have there, they can approve purchase requests or purchase orders up to the value of 5,000, for example, for that particular user. And of course, this is where you specify the approvers. If multiple approvers is not switched on, either of these persons can actually approve this user's purchase requests or purchase orders. If multiple approvers is switched on, you would have to specify if you had 3 or 4 approvers, how many approvals are required. Even with 4 persons, maybe only 3 of the approvals are required out of the 4. So you get to decide that. And here we have the bonus slide. I want to let you see this because this is something that has literally just landed this week as of Monday. And if you joined me yesterday for the release webinar, you would have been introduced to our latest feature on deferrer. And I'm letting you know about this now because it is part of the procurement process, or certainly can be on your purchase invoices. So this is where you can defer the costs, expenditure. I know it says defer revenue at the top there, but the screen actually looks exactly the same for our defer costs. So this is where you can defer the cost on a purchase invoice. So for example, maybe you have an agreement with a supplier that you're going to pay for stock over a 12-month period, or for a particular license, or for a particular service, for example. So where they've invoiced you and you want to basically capture that expenditure in your P&L over 12 months, then you can defer the cost on your purchase invoices. So ultimately what that will do is it will remove the full cost. So even though the invoice has been added through the defer expenditure, we will remove that full cost from the P&L and it will go into a defer expenditure GL account. And then through the division of the 12 months, for example, whatever that value is divided by 12 will then be taken out via a journal entry every single month. So you're accounting for the expenditure over an agreed period of time, and it just makes it much more easier to track and visible over that particular accounting period as you move forward month by month. So it's reducing down on the manual adjustments. It's improving your financial accuracy around basically being able to pay for something over a particular period of time. And of course, the same goes for defer revenue. That's something that we've introduced on the sales side as well. So I just wanted to make you aware of this. And if you want to see the full demonstration, do take a look at or reach out to us and we can share the release webinar that we took yesterday with you, and you can also get access to the information on our help center, help.enterpryze.com. If you look for a deferrer, you'll actually see a full document there and you'll be able to access the demonstration there as well. So take a look at that. So let's now move on to the key piece of today's demonstration, which is all around invoice automation. And I wanted to just bring you back to a step just to remind you about what it is that we do on the platform all around automation and key pieces of automation to make life easier for you as well when you're processing your transactions. So obviously purchases is something that we're going to look at this morning, which is all around auto scan of your purchase invoices from PDF, where you can match those then to open orders or open deliveries and approve those. So this kind of, in essence, gives you an approval step, again, around spend, but it's more so based on the purchase orders and deliveries that are already in the system. So it's only based on the invoices that are coming through. So there's a whole setup involved around the purchase invoice scanning. So I'll go through that with you, obviously, in detail. But in terms of automation, what else do we do for you across the platform? So we have automation across stock, so the stock item reordering, which I'll talk about a little bit as well today in the purchasing menu around item reordering. We've got the bank feed automation, so bringing your bank feed into you on a daily basis and interacting with all your different bank institutions. We've got the expenses as well, because you can scan receipts and for easy recording, so they can be scanned very simply on the mobile expense app. So that's something that we will look at down term 2 on the expenses module as well. So lots to look at in terms of automation. So invoice automation, what is it? So it's the ability to scan a purchase invoice, simple. And it's done via OCR scanning. So what we do is we read the PDF file in, and the whole idea is that we learn on the basis of reading that invoice in. So if, for example, it's your first time to scan an invoice in, and for that particular, for example, for a particular supplier, it's the very first time, there might be a couple of key indicators that you might have to tell the system, look, it's always an item invoice, or this particular item, it didn't quite pick it up, but then you can associate that item on the first invoice. And then after that, it's going to learn. Next time the supplier sends an invoice, it's automatic. It's going to recognize the products. It's going to recognize the supplier. It's going to recognize that it's always an item type. So at all times, it's machine learning. I'm actually going to show you 2 examples of that today. I'm going to show you one where I've already had the machine learning on a particular supplier. I'm going to bring in an invoice, which happens to be the 3rd invoice for that supplier. But I'm also going to do one for a supplier on a service basis where it hasn't learned anything about that particular supplier just yet, just so that you can see the 2 differences. So ultimately what it does is it creates a draft invoice for approving. So nice and simple. You can scan multiple PDFs. So whether you upload, you can see there whether you upload the PDFs multiple, so whether they reside in one particular folder on your laptop or in a shared folder, for example, and then you can upload multiple PDFs all at once. Or alternatively, the idea behind approvals is that, but the idea behind the invoice automation is that you might have a group of key staff who are only allowed to record the invoices or to review the invoices or to approve the invoices. So what you do on the invoice automation is you define who those key staff are, put in their email addresses, and then you enable those users to automatically forward any PDFs received from the suppliers to a central email box. And that makes it very simple and very easy, because the central email box is our OCR scanning email box. And then that automatically scans in the draft invoices ready for you to go in to edit, approve, and to review at your leisure. So they're automatically then in the invoice automation tab for you. So machine learning, I've mentioned already, is continuous with each upload. Central email address, so this is important. The central email address is something that we provide. You will see this in the settings window. So this is something that we provide for you. You define the users who can scan the invoices. I've mentioned that already. So this is your key core, your core group of users that are enabled to forward on the PDFs to the central email box. The benefits are endless, obviously, in terms of using invoice automation. You can see them all here. I'm not going to go through all of them. I think they speak for themselves in terms of all of the interactions, the saving on admin, the purchase approvals, because ultimately what you are doing is it's another control on spend. Automatic GL account postings, again, because it's based around your items and it's based around your services. So whatever you have on the platform, they are the GL accounts it's going to use. So that's automatic postings without you having to assign those GL accounts. Automatic matching to related documents. So if you have open orders and open deliveries, that it can auto match against open transactions, or you can switch and change to a different transaction. So you have control, but at all times you can see there's so many benefits to using the invoice. So let me just show you here where the settings reside. So when we go into here into settings and we go into module settings, there's a section here under the purchasing. You would have seen it on the previous slide around the overall settings required for purchasing. But this section here, you can see where we enable the purchase OCR scanning. So this cannot be done without obviously discussing this further with us. So you do, if this is something that you wish to take up for your organization, you will have to speak to one of our sales reps, or even start by having a conversation with support, and they will direct you to the relevant account manager to have the conversation around enabling invoice OCR scanning. And of course there you can see where we have the dedicated email for invoice scanning. So this is the central email address. So you can see there you can copy that URL and make that available to the key staff. So what does that mean then in terms of the key staff? So under the whitelist emails, this is where you define who can forward PDFs to the central email box. So all of the relevant users. Anybody outside of that, it's not going to even recognize them. And of course, credits. So again, this is a conversation with support and with your account manager. So these are the number of invoices per month for OCR scanning. And of course, if there's any differences between a purchase order and an invoice, do you want those to auto post to a specific GL account? So you can also, when there's a discrepancy, and maybe the discrepancy is around, generally it can be around rounding or price differences, and even if it's just a nominal amount, if you want to post the difference to another GL account, that you can do that at this stage. Just to touch base on the other side of the item reordering, because this resides in your purchasing menu. So this is another part of the automation piece around reordering stock. And the reason I'm bringing this in, because of course, item reordering ultimately creates a purchase order for your suppliers. And the whole idea here is that you can do the reordering in bulk. So whether that's for raw materials or whether that's for bill of material items, that you can do it all through the item reordering and reduce the time down that it takes to currently reorder stock from your suppliers. So there's lots of different filters that you have available to you around minimum, maximum stock levels, in-stock quantity, committed on order from suppliers already. So just to show you that here, you start off by selecting the item type, so whether that's raw materials or bill of materials, the relevant filters. So do I want to look at a specific supplier? So I want to maybe order items for a specific supplier. Do I want to look at, quantity by warehouse, the different stock levels, and then ultimately enter the reordered quantity and selected items. And bottom line is you're going to create purchase orders. So that will obviously be multiple then for multiple creation. And it, again, it's just a nice automation piece around item reordering. But we look at that. Okay, well, let's move on to the live demonstration. And let me just share my screen with you. So I'm just going to pop in here and go into Enterprise and start off by sharing my screen. So I'm in purchasing here, as you can see, and we're going to go into this tab here for invoice automation. So if your users are part of the whitelist email list that I showed you as part of settings, where they are forwarding PDFs to a central email box, what will happen is those emails or those PDFs will automatically appear here. And yes, they can forward multiple PDFs at a time if they so wish, and this is where they will appear. You can see here, starting off at the top of the screen, I've got a couple of panels to differentiate between what type of transactions I want to look at. So I want to filter down and look at just item type invoices, I can, or just service type invoices, I can. So I can switch on and off the filters as I require. As you can see, when I take one off, it'll tell me the value and the total quantity. So what's still left to be approved in terms of those types of invoices. We have filters in the next panel. So we can filter by supplier. So if I just want to focus in and look at one specific supplier, perhaps we have a large volume of invoices coming in for a particular supplier each day or each week or each month, for example, we can focus in and just look at the approvals required for that particular supplier. Or if we want to do it by buyer, we can also just focus in on invoices that only have a notice or only have actions. And if you want to understand what the notices and actions mean, you can see there we have an info button to tell you exactly what notices can contain. So for example, notices can contain reference to missing related documents, and that is because there's no related PO or purchase delivery found. There might be a tax discrepancy or a pricing discrepancy where it might have found a PO, but there's a price difference between the PO and the scanned invoice. These are quite common, and obviously notices are things that you can actually in fact ignore and decide, well look, no, it's fine, the invoice, I'm happy with that, we're going to accept that as is, and you can ignore the notices. Actions are things generally that you have to action on. So of course, missing supplier is an obvious one. You have to know a document has a supplier, tax codes, item details, dates if they're invalid for posting periods, etc. Missing GL account codes. So there's information that you absolutely have to have, and that's obviously to ensure that when the invoice is added, it goes to the right place. So let's take a look at uploading a PDF manually. I'm actually going to start with, I can select the files here, and I'm actually going to take through two of them. I've got one here for Anthony Smith, and I've actually got one here for Acme Supplies. One is an item and one is a service. I'm going to click on open because I can bring in multiple files. Let's just click on save. So what you should see there now on my upload grid on the left, once it's brought those in, great, created pending invoices. Now, it thinks, and I can see what's happened there straight off the bat, it thinks the top one that I brought in for Acme is for Anthony Smith. So it's obviously confused because I haven't brought anything in for Acme yet. So this is the one I mentioned about the service invoice. But let's not focus on that one just yet. Let's go to this one here, the 803. First thing I can see here, and this is just a grid, and it gives me a lot of information before I've even gone to preview the PDF. I can see that there's 2 lines. And I click on the number of lines and I can see exactly what the lines are that it's brought in. I can see the item details, I can see the quantity, I can see the unit price. So already I can see exactly what this invoice is going to look like. I have brought in invoices before for this particular supplier, so it has learned about the items in question, and I can see here already that it's only got 2 notices. So it's saying potentially pricing discrepancy and potentially a missing related document. Perfect. We can handle that. That's easy to resolve. More importantly, I can see all the different dates when it was uploaded, go across here to the value itself, and I can also do a preview. So I can preview the PDF or the scanned document. We will be bringing in a change around this so that when you do preview the scanned document, that you will still be able to see the full grid in view, and then the scanned document will just pop in on the right hand side. So that is something we are bringing potentially in the next release or the one thereafter. So that is something coming to the system. But as you can see there, I can open it in another tab. I can click here if I want to view it in full on another tab, but this is exactly what I've scanned in. Then from here, of course, as I said, there's column chooser. So if there's any other columns that you wish to bring in and ensure if values need to be updated, that you can check all of those out. So for example, if you had any custom fields that you wanted to populate against the invoice, that you can view those as well on the grid. So let's click into the 3 dots, and you can see from here we can approve, reject, or edit. Let's just edit this particular invoice. And as I've said, it's already done some machine learning because this is my 3rd invoice for this particular supplier. It knows the supplier is Anthony Smith. It's learned that information. And when I scroll down, it's learned about the products. This is the products I'm always getting from this particular supplier. It's learned that this is the tax code that I always use because I updated it on the very first invoice. What it didn't do was bring in the related document for the 2nd line, but I can easily rectify that by just selecting that here. So we also have various other options here where we can edit the batch. So if you've got batch and serial assigned items, that they can also be reviewed here at this point in time. We can remove blank lines. So often you'll find in a PDF there's lines that are just not relevant, and you can select those lines and remove them. So that's the whole idea here, that you can select the relevant lines and remove them if they're not necessary to bring them into the system. You can, of course, add additional lines as you can with all other transactions. You can see here your custom fields. You can see here as well, you can allocate your cost centers. So that's important if analysis is important to you, to take your invoice through to, so if you want to make sure you've got the relevant cost centers, make sure that they've also been added. So what can we do next? Up here at the very top, we can review any actions as well. We can also view the PDF from here as well. So you can click on this to open up the view for the PDF or open up in another tab. We can approve, so calculate tax and approve, or we can just simply save it or reject it. So we can come back and look at that invoice again. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to calculate the tax and approve. So this is your opportunity, the same as you would do in a purchase invoice. If for any reason there was a slight discrepancy on the tax amount on a particular line, that you can now change it at this point and then submit and document updated, and you will now get confirmation that invoice 90 has been created. So that's done. So I can click on that invoice, and this is the important part about the scanning. When I look at this particular invoice, you can see here that it's linked to purchase order number 91 because that's what we related it to on the invoice automation piece. That could have been a delivery, simple as a delivery. But when I scroll on down here, you can see there based on purchase order number 91, but more importantly on the attachments, I've got the original scanned invoice. So I can click on that and open that up then into another tab. So at all times I have a way back of finding out what the original invoice contained. And of course, this is a true invoice. It's been approved. It's now on your purchase invoice tab, and it's now on your, it's also gone into your GL account postings as well from the accounting point of view. So back on your invoice automation grid, let's go back to that. That invoice has disappeared. It's not gone anywhere. You've got to remember that we've got a status column here. So what I'm looking at is only open invoices for approval. If I wanted to look back to see what had been complete, I could simply just select the status, and then you can see exactly what you have already completed. So now let's look at something slightly different. Invoice number 913 that I imported. Now I know I've imported this for another supplier. It hasn't learned yet because I haven't imported a service transaction for this supplier before. So what I'm going to do is, again, I can preview that. I can see that it's Acme Supplies. So let's teach it. So you can see there we've got a couple of notices, but we've also got a couple of actions. So let's teach it now on the first scan. So let's edit this particular invoice. And what I'd like to do, first thing I want to do here is I want to switch this. I want to switch it to a service invoice. And the next thing I'm going to do as well is, let me take off that supplier, and I'm going to switch it to Acme Supplies. Now, before I go any further, as you can see, because it hasn't learned something yet, we don't have the approval button yet. So what I'm going to do is I've switched it to service. I've switched the supplier. I'm going to save it because I wanted to record the fact that it is now a service invoice. I wanted to relearn, and I wanted to update this particular screen. So now I'll need to come down and see what are the scan insights. So this is where it changes around a service invoice. We get a different feedback. We get scan insights. So it tells me here, this supplier is set to line level invoicing, which means each line on the original order must be matched by value. So if there's a purchase order, you can approve on the invoice and it will create a new invoice for you. Or if we can view, you can see POs exist in the system for the supplier. So what I need to do is come down to the line itself, and I can see here what I had specified on the actual PDF itself was the word service, but it hasn't found a matching item for that. So what we can do is we can say, well, in our platform, service is in fact service 1. That's the first thing we can start with. And then you can see there we have the automatic GL account. So we're teaching it again. So what I'm doing there now is I'm selecting the line and I'm teaching it. So I'm just going to also see if there is an open, which there is, an open PO as well for that particular line. Or again, I could just leave that blank. Let me just save that. Again, I'm just teaching it. This is the first time for this particular supplier. And let's just bring that in again. Now you can see what's happened. The approval button has switched because it's been able to locate the supplier, but more importantly, locate the item. And you can see there one by service one. And what I can do here under the scan insights as well. So let me just link that in to that particular PO. Let me just save that again. So I'm just teaching it that first time. And let just the scan insights just update on the basis of that. Excellent. Now you can see what's happened here. So the scan insights has told me your invoice scan has found purchase order number 92. So in fact, the options that are available to you, you can select the PO, copy from PO, you can add more lines, or very simply what we can do now is we can simply go up and, like we did with the last one, we can simply just approve. And again, if for any reason we wanted to add on a percentage for tax. So if I look at the PDF, in fact, there was a tax rate used. So maybe what we need to do again is just to make sure that is using the right tax rate. So I'm going to use this one here for the 23%. I'm going to just save that. And I'm now going to calculate the tax and approve that. So it knows everything coming in from that supplier is always going to be 23%, or that item is going to be 23%. And now the invoice is created. So again, if I review and view that particular invoice, it's now a service purchase invoice linked to PO number 92. And again, if I scroll down to the bottom, we can see there the linked attachment for that invoice. So lots of learning goes on in relation to the invoice automation piece. And obviously, if I was to bring in that invoice again, for example, for a second time as a service invoice, I shouldn't have to specify, because we saw that with Anthony Smith. I didn't have to say it was Anthony Smith. I didn't have to say which items, because it has learned. So this would be quite common, for example, any services or bills that are coming in, let's say for light and heat. It's going to be the same service every time from that particular supplier that's coming in. The only differentiator, of course, is going to be what related document it's going to find, or the value or the cost at that particular time when it brings in the document. So lots of ongoing machine learning. So it's a great one to use within the system. Are there any more questions? So what I'd like to share with you now is just to remind you about what's up and coming in the next session. So for example, if we look here at the next module, so we will look at everything. We'll do a recap, of course, on today, but it's all around accounting. So we'll look at the chart of accounts, the importance of journals, cost accounting overview, setting budgets. So again, around spend management and control. What does that look like in your organization? We will look at the initial settings that you can put in place around the accounting as well, and the importance of reporting and understanding what those reports are that you can actually run within the system, such as tax, profit and loss, balance sheet and trial balance. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today, and I hope that you have taken away something valuable around the purchasing. And as I've said, if you missed anything in relation to the latest release, do check out the webinar that was released yesterday on the latest release for November. And if you can't see it, reach out to us and we will make sure that you are sent on a copy. But thank you all so much, and I look forward to seeing you on the next lesson in 2 weeks on accounting. Thank you for your time. Take care.